Hello again, I'm Param Singh. In the last video, we looked at a compound data structure that Elixir provides, which is called a tuple. And we noted that the tuple is appropriate for modeling information that naturally contains two or more separate pieces of data. Now we want to do a little more practice using tuples by solving the following two problems. The first one consumes a tuple and the second one is going to produce a tuple. So let's look at the first problem. Create a point type and convert distance from origin to use this type. Here we are in the editor, and the first thing we need to do is to create our custom type. For that, I will go at the top and start with add type attribute followed by the name of the type that we want. Let's call this point because that's what we have been asked to do. 2 colons followed by the type we want. So it's going to be a tuple of two numbers, and there we have it. So we have a type point defined like so. Going down to our function, before I change the function implementation, I want to note that if I switch to my test file, I have already changed the tests to consume a tuple instead. So now instead of consuming two numbers 3 and 4, it is consuming one tuple containing two numbers 3 and 4. So now if I go back to my test and run it, I would see that I have 3 test failures. These 3 test failures belong to my distance from the origin function. So certainly we need to change that, and we'll start with step 1, which is looking at the spec. And the spec, instead of taking two numbers, we are going to say that it should take a point instead and produce a number. Looking at the purpose statement, we are going to say instead of taking x comma y as a pair of numbers, we are going to change this to an xy tuple. Third is a stub. We don't want to recreate a stub because our function is already implemented. We just need to change the implementation to use the point instead. So here I say we'll take a point and then we'll use pattern matching to select the values from that point, and those x and y values will be used in the next expression to compute the distance. Let's go back to our console, run mix test again. We see that our 3 tests pass. So there we have it, our new function that uses a point instead of separate x and y as numbers. But before we move on to the second problem, I want to note that when we just want to destructure the input arguments, Elixir provides a more cleaner way to do so right in the function header itself. Let's see how do we do that. Instead of looking and using a point here, we are going to change this to xy tuple like so, and this will use the pattern matching to bind x and y to the appropriate values. In this case, now we don't need this separate line, and I'm going to save my file and go back to run my test again, and once again I see that all of my 3 tests pass. So here is the final implementation of our new function. It takes a point and produces a number, and in the implementation we destructure the point right in the function header itself by using pattern matching, and then finally we used x and y values to compute the distance.